Hey Dan,
Hey Nick,
listen,
good to see you,
thanks
man.
so much. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. I do know that you're not feeling 100% today, so even more appreciative of you giving the time to share and come on board and have this discussion.
No, you're welcome, man. Anytime, bro.
All right. So as I said, kind of briefly before we got going, and just in our interactions before arranging for today. This is really a discussion that's going to be aimed at giving people an opportunity to know who you are, a little bit
Yeah,
about what you do, because I'm really keen for my viewers and listeners to be able to learn from individuals who might be able to share some insights, some inspiration. I know that you have various things that you're responsible for and that you've been
yeah,
juggling over many years, because I've known you for a few years. And I really feel that some of what you're going to share will be able to just be valuable to those who are listening and watching. So why don't we
hope so.
start? Yeah, I'm not hoping so. I know it will,
I know
because I
so.
know
Yeah,
you. So why don't we start by me just asking you to introduce yourself,
mm,
and to do that in the context of who is Dan?
yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, first off, just it's a privilege to jump on this. I say podcast, YouTube, and it's been great just to watch you sort of grow and evolve over. Gosh, man, what 15 years? So yeah, I'm excited to do this. So yeah, my name is Dan. I'm a nearly a 39-year-old man. I live in Bedford, originally from London. My family and I are married to a lady called Charlene, who's South African. And we moved up here with our two kids, gosh, 8 years ago. 8 years ago. So we left Southeast London, born and bred in Southeast London. And it's still, it's funny, I still call that home, even though, I've not really been back there, but always when I go away, people say, where you're from? I always say London, you know what I mean? So we have two children, Caitlin, who is 11, who's in secondary school. She's in year 7. And Malachi, who, my man looks like an 18-year-old, but he's only 9. But he's pushing nearly size 8 feet. So you can
Wow.
imagine, he's a big boy. So like I say, we relocated, 8 years ago. We were currentently, like, I'm currently from Catford, Lewisham, in South East London, and we were living in Brixton, or just outside Brixton, for sort of 4.5 years. And I can share why we moved in a bit, but we sort of felt it was the right time just to leave the big smoke. And we've ended up in Bedford, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know where Bedford was before we moved. So, so we've been here for 8 years. We've been married for coming up, should know this, isn't it? Coming up 14 years. So we feel that we are right in the thick of it, shall we say, in terms of sort of spinning plates, responsibilities, and stuff like that. But I can go into that in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so that
All
should
right.
give you just a bit of a flavour of who I am.
Yeah. So a dad, a husband, dad to 2 growing children, a husband for what, say 12 years, 14 years.
14
So that's a long stint. You're doing well there.
Yeah, man.
Very good. So I'm curious, maybe if you can just say something about what life was like before leaving the big smoke. So you've said that you originally from South London, and you guys about 8 years ago made the decision to leave the big smoke, to leave London and relocate to Bedford. Now I know we've done a similar thing, so it'd be good to kind of get a sense from you as to what was life like before leaving London.
Yeah, gosh, you know what? It feels like, I'll be honest with you, it feels like 2 separate lives, if I'm being honest with you. It's, and you may be able to sort of understand this, but we had, the kids were very, very young when we was in London. So I want to say Caitlin was 3, Mally was maybe 6 months. But they can't really remember it. They can't really remember London. And it's almost like I can't really remember life pre-kids. It's interesting, just
Mm,
because
mm.
we're coming up 12 years in, and it's so much goes on, so much happens, and as kids are consuming, demanding. They're a blessing, but there's also a lot of challenges that come with that. And look, man, I had hair before I had kids, and now look, you know what I mean. So I think what was like before London, I think probably just as busy as it was now, but in a different way.
Mm, mm.
I think we were, I was commuting, so I was in South London, but I was working for a charity over in East London.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot to be done throughout the week, in as much as it was, you get up, you go to work, you come back, you go to bed, and it was really much that. Whereas the weekend, I guess it was much the same it is now, just a lot more expensive.
Okay. Okay.
You know what I mean? We was involved in a church plant down there, so I think that took up a lot of our time, and that took up a lot of our time.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's really helpful to hear you say that life pre-leaving the big smoke and after, almost like two separate lives. It's two different experiences, and that actually you recognize that those two experiences aren't the same. You guys have clearly done lots of changing, and there's been a lot of adaptations in that time anyway. I think it would be helpful maybe just to get a sense in terms of what you do. I know you said you're a husband and a dad, but actually I think it would be really helpful to get a sense of what you do, and maybe we can touch on what that was like in terms of pre-move, post-move, because I know that you've been on a remarkable journey, which I feel I've been really privileged to see and observe over the years, and we can probably touch on that in just a bit as well. But why don't you say something about what you do, Dan?
Yeah, cool. So I think just one thing, just to sort of go back on one thing that sort of just came to mind as you was talking about in terms of what it was like living in London and now I think one thing that I've noticed is just the pace of life. I think that's probably one of the key things that I think, I had a couple of years where I was commuting back, and initially I didn't really notice the difference, but then towards the end, I could just recognise that as soon as you hit London, it's fast moving, from catching trains to grabbing coffees to just doing things, and everything is on against the clock. Not that it's not up here, but I think it's it's like you live in a, like I say, smaller town, or it's just everything's just a little bit slower. And it's only sometimes when you remove yourself from situations you can look back and recognise certain traits or certain things that were going on. So I think that would be one of the big key things, just to sort of before we move on.
I'm glad you said that. Even just this weekend gone, I was in a conversation involving 3 other individuals.
Yeah.
And one of the individuals highlighted that another person in the conversation, whenever they see them, they seem to be walking really, really fast. And the response from that person was, that's what I'm used to, because that's what it was like when I was in London.
Yeah, 100%.
There is still sometimes this sense of working and moving at a different pace to where you've relocated to. And I think I'm absolutely with you. Obviously we relocated ourselves out of London, and one of the things that we noticed straight away was exactly that, just the pace. It's a much more relaxed, slower pace where we are now in comparison to London, and we're the same. Whenever we commute back into London to visit family or friends, the moment you come off, the moment you get onto the road, the A roads that are joining into London, notice even the driving's different. It's almost like a different world, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny. We popped back at Christmas. We took the kids into London, and I had to remind myself as I was coming off the M1, coming down Edgware Road, I was like, okay, Dan, we're in London now. You got to take them opportunities on the road, because otherwise you ain't going nowhere.
You're not moving.
You're not moving. But
Brilliant,
But yeah,
brilliant.
to answer your question,
Yeah.
to what I do, yeah. So I'm a gym owner. I'm a personal trainer or a strength coach. I guess they're both sort of interchangeable. And really, that's been my profession on and off pretty much um, my whole working life. I've sort of dabbled in and done a few other things, but I've always been in the fitness industry. So yeah, currently I recently sort of just took over an existing gym, the back end of last year. So that is now mine, and I'm sort of sole owner of that, and I'm just learning how to grow and run a business. But alongside that, I guess I also work for the business as well in terms of I have my own clientele that I work with. And I've done that in Bedford for the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you've as far back as you can remember, you've been within the fitness industry. Would that be would that be the industry? Yeah. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I can take us back 20 something years and tell you essentially how that journey began if you want.
That might be helpful to hear. Yeah, just by way of background and context, especially as we approach where you are now as a business owner, because I think it would be great to hear what it was like then and what you've found in terms of adapting now, particularly as someone who owns the gym. And I know that's something that was a long-term vision. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me very, very quickly roll you back more like sort of 30 odd years. So I always remember growing up and I always used to watch The World's Strongest Man. And that was always, I don't know what it was. I remember just watching that and something drew me to just getting massive and big and training and lifting weights and that type of stuff. And fast forward to sort of in the teenagers, I was 14 when I was allowed to join the first gym. The first gym was a place called Beckenham Leisure Centre. It was pretty much from there. I used to go to school. I used to go to school in a place called Bromley, which essentially is just outside of London. People live there think they call it London. It's not, but
it's not.
It's not. But I used to travel an hour a day, 3 days a week when I was 14, just to go to the gym and train. And that really was all I wanted to do. To the point where I hit 18. I left school with a few qualifications, not too many though, if I'll be honest with you. I was one of them underachievers, always got caught up with the wrong crowd. And for me, I was like, well, this is all I want to do. I want to be in a gym. I want to be training. And I thought, okay, well, then it looks like it's personal training, gym instructing. So I did a qualification. And then pretty soon after that, at the age of 19, I was working in a gym, like a commercial sort of gym, like a big commercial gym. And that was me. That was me, really. That was me sort of just personal training. And I think at that age, I thought I knew a lot. And I was very blessed in terms of I was surrounded by a lot of people who knew a lot more than me. And I was able to, I guess, be like a sponge and just try and pick up as much information as I possibly could from them. And I think looking back at that, and that was just invaluable. Even I remember having, like, the gym manager she was very militant. Like, this wouldn't be allowed. No beards allowed. You had to be clean shaven. You had to interact with multiple people a day. And at the time when you're 19, that's not what you want to be hearing. You just want to chill and just da-da-da-da. But I look back at that and it's interesting. And we can go into some of the things I'm now implementing 20 years later are some of the, I guess, principles and approach that this, my sort of gym manager taught me a number of years ago. So it's interesting. But yeah, then that sort of took me into a journey into PT and coaching. I had a small period where I was working for a charity where I would teach level 2 and level 3 qualifications to, let's say, disengaged young people. But quite quickly found myself back coaching and training people. And here we are now. Yeah, man.
So it's been a significant journey. It's been a number of years where, you said from watching The World's Strongest Man, you caught the buzz. At that moment, you were like, I want to be strong.
Mm.
Uh, you know,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that stuck out for me was, you say from the age of 14, you were traveling an hour a day to train.
Yeah, man. So I was going from Bromley to Beckenham, because obviously you wait for a bus.
Mm.
I was getting training, and then it was about a half an hour bus journey back.
Mm.
At the end of the day. So
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yeah, man. I don't know if it's a gift or I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's
Mm.
just one of them things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in along that journey, you've become a dad and you've become a husband as well. I
Yeah.
guess one of the things that I'd be interested to hear, and maybe viewers and listeners might be interested to hear as well, is when you have a significant shift in your life in terms of your responsibilities, i.e., becoming a father, becoming a husband,
Yeah.
those commitments you have, i.e., training regularly,
Mm.
consistently, which I know from, you know, our interactions outside of this, that you train consistently and regularly.
Mm.
How do you manage that? How does that
Mm.
get managed in terms of, you know, you're now juggling a marriage,
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
and your commitments in terms of your own commitments to training? What did that look like initially?
I'll be honest with you, Nick. In my head, it's quite easy. Now the
Okay.
outworking of it, maybe not so much. And I explain what I mean by that. I think for me, it's always a question of priorities. And then once you figure them out, it's all a question of about time management.
Okay.
I think one of the things that I've realised recently is I'm not sure, and I'm happy for people to disagree with this. I'm not sure there is such a thing as balance, because generally when we're balancing things, we're balancing two things, and the majority of us are trying to balance more than two things. And if we were trying to balance, it just doesn't work. But what we can do is we can look at how do we manage our time. So I think that's where that's what I found helpful, and that is what I've tried to prioritize. So I'll be honest with you, the first thing that goes in my diary every single week is my own training. And the amount of I've been around a lot of gym owners over the last few years, and one of the things they've always said is, your own training suffers. And I've always said, if and when that happens, not me, because this is something that I've prioritized for. It's like motivation comes and goes, right? We know that. I think people must know. But if you can create discipline, when you have things like children, marriage, a business, now there obviously there are some extremes things that happen, but if you can create those disciplines fairly early, or get used to sort of creating disciplines, when those things comes along, it's like, okay, well, I now need to pivot, I now need to shift. But those things can still be in my diary, my life. It's just they may just look a little bit different. So, for example, one of the things when the kids were really young, I was fortunate to be in the gym, right? So then it does take away the fact that, okay, well, I've got a lunch break. Well, this one I'm going to train, or around clients and stuff like that. But even on the weekends now, I'll sometimes still train Saturday mornings. But I know I also work Saturday mornings. So I have to be with a client at 7:00, and then I take my son to football. Okay, cool. Well, let's work backwards then. Okay, I need to be in the gym for 5:30.
Right.
And I'm not saying, like, in theory, like, okay, it's really easy, right? Now the outworking of it, like, you then have to go back further. So you need to be in bed before. You need to. Do you know what I mean? There are a lot of things things you need to make sure that those things can happen. But I think if you can, I've been doing it for so long now, and it's a priority in terms of those things. It's just a case of, well, then I just put it in the diary. And I think it's the same with marriage, with children. I mean, for some people may say that sounds a bit robotic, but I think if we don't plan things, things don't happen, right? And I think you want to go on holiday, you plan for it. You don't just wait up and go, right, we can, you know what I mean? So I think there are some of the just planning and organizing my time to trying to be as efficient as I possibly can. I think has helped me stay consistent across the board, especially with my training and even with my business. There's certain times I have reoccurring slots in my diary that come up. So, for example, Thursday afternoons are either meeting times or it's running the numbers, catching up on people who may have dropped off. It's just there in the diary. So I look at, okay, cool, we do that for an hour and move on.
So that's really helpful. So this idea of remaining committed to something is so much not that it's easy, but it's easier once you recognize that thing you're committing to is a priority.
Yeah.
But the actual outworking of that is about how do you plan it in? How do you structure it into your daily, weekly, monthly schedule to ensure that it's going to happen? Because you pointed out that the motivation comes and goes. You know, there are moments where you may not feel like training. There are moments where you may not feel like completing an assignment that you need to get completed, or you may not feel like X, Y, Z. But the fact that you, for example, have said, well, you've got dedicated things slotted into your calendar, into your diary that says, right, come rain or shine, that's happening. Unless there is obviously a significant crisis or something else comes up. But typically speaking, you will stick to that commitment.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we prioritize things that are important to us.
Right.
I mean, I think in my mind, it's as simple as that. I know it's not, right? And I think there is an element of, I know in terms of sort of discipline, and I probably am wired slightly different, I think maybe I've just been doing it so long, it just feels very normal and very easy to me. And that can be challenging sometimes, especially when I'm working with people, because I'm working with people that 9 times out of 10 are coming to me because they need help with strength, performance, weight loss, building habits. And I think I've had to learn to go, but just do it like that. It doesn't always work like that.
So what I'm hearing you say is what might be quite natural to you now, because you've done it over a period of time. For others, some of whom you're working with on a day-to-day basis as a strength coach, a strength and conditioning coach, it may not be as straightforward or simple for them.
No, definitely.
Okay, so I think that leads to something else that I'm curious about. In terms of, so on a typical week, you get a new inquiry, you start working with a new client. This person's not trained before, or they've come out of they've not trained for a while, and consistency is the challenge. Getting started is a challenge. What kind of conversation would you have with them with regards to getting themselves in some kind of momentum to be able to win, to be able to succeed?
Well, I think that's a good question, Nick, and I think you said the word win, and I think that's important. I'll touch on that in a minute. But I think one of the things I try and do is I just try and listen. I try and, because it's not, when you come and work with a good coach anyway, it shouldn't be cookie cut. It shouldn't be, well, what I've did for Jane, I'm going to give to Sarah, and what I've did for John, I'm going to give to Paul. I mean, it shouldn't be like that. Unfortunately, it is. It can be like a lot. So I think what I try and do is to try and just ask. Generally, we have a conversation that could last anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour, where I just ask as many questions as possible. I won't really say much. I'll just try and gather as much information as possible, just about, what does their lifestyle look like? What does their, what does their sleep look like? Are they in a relationship? What does their work look like? What time do they go to bed? What do they like? What do they not like? Because I think as soon as you can just try and gather as much information as you possibly can, it helps to try and find the answer, quote unquote, just to try and help them. Because like we know, people are complex. I think a lot of the stuff that I do, the principles are the same for everyone, and it's actually quite easy. but we, especially in your line, we know that we're not easy. People are very complex. So I need to try and find, okay, well, what tool do you need to try and win and succeed? And I think that'd be the first thing, try and gather as much information. And then I generally just ask them one question. I ask, like, if you had a crazy, crazy week, everything went wrong, all this stuff happened. In that week, what do you feel you could commit to in terms of time that you could give to training? And I ask them just to try and picture that week. And we all know what those weeks are like. You know what I mean? The kids are ill, work's a madness and all that type of stuff. So I ask them, just picture that week. In that week, tell me what you can commit to. And they may say, and obviously it varies, they may say half an hour, twice a week. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that's what we're going to start with.
That's fantastic.
And I think one of the things, it's a lot easier, I'll be honest with you, and this is a bit of a blanket statement, it's a lot easier to do this with females than it is with guys. Because, and it's interesting, the demographic of our gym is 85% female. Okay. Because in my experience, when it comes to working out, females generally don't feel as confident, and they don't feel that they can do as much as they can, whereas guys think they can do more than they actually can. And I think it's and I get that, right? Because if you just go back the last 40, 50, 60 years, you walk into a gym, even when I first walked into a gym, or the second gym, it was like a bodybuilding gym. I went, I was 16. There was one female in there, and the rest it was a working class gym in Downham, and it was, it was. I was intimidated when I walked in. So imagine what a female would feel, and there was one female in there. Yeah, so I think I know why. I understand why. I do think the landscape is changing now due to social media and that type of stuff. And we can talk about that, but generally, I feel that it's a lot more easier to get through to females and understand because in general they're better, just more in touch with what's going on emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. So they can say, "This is why I'm struggling." Whereas guys, it can be a lot of bravado, and there's almost trying to not go toe to toe with me sometimes. So I feel like I've lost the question, Anik, but so I generally ask that question: what can you commit to?
That's good.
And then we go from there. Yeah.
No, that's good. So in what you've basically said there is that you would, when you're working with someone for the first time, you will effectively listen, gather as much information as you possibly can. And as part of that, what you're trying to do is help them to come to establish or communicate to you. If everything went pear-shaped on any given week, what could they commit to in order to be able to succeed, in order to be able to win? And that's the starting point that you'll work from. And I think you might have heard me say it as you were speaking. I think that's a fantastic starting point, actually, because what you are doing is you're helping each of your clients to succeed.
Yeah.
What I also found interesting was this sense of, from your experience, you find that sometimes guys can overestimate what they can do, whereas some of your female clients will likely underestimate what they can do.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And the backdrop of that, from your experience and what you've seen over the years, is likely due to maybe gym culture, likely due to
probably just culture in itself,
which seeps into these different spaces, doesn't it?
Of course, 100%. Yeah.
But you also mentioned you see where the landscape has been changing, and particularly around in a social media space. What do you mean by that?
So I think one of the things, and I'm mindful of, in terms of, on social media, generally all I see sometimes on social media is the fitness space, because that's a lot of the people who I follow. So sometimes my perception can be a little bit, I wouldn't say warped, is probably not the right word, but it's not a true reflection in terms of what everyone else sees. Because, I open my phone and I could see a guy or girl lifting, training, all that type of stuff. But I think now there is so much material out there through social media, through TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, in terms of it's become a lot more commercialized. And I think all you have to do now is to walk into a gym, like a big company gym, and it's almost like you're walking into like a social setting, like a nightclub.
Mm.
I found, like, no, obviously I train at my space, and I've got another membership where I train. It's more of a, I don't want to use the word hardcore training space, but I just sometimes go there to train, just so I don't train at work. But on the times that I've gone into, these sort of 24-hour gyms, it's fascinating for me to see. In many ways, it's great because I think there's a lot of females in there, and there's a lot of, say, the older generation who are in there and working out and doing stuff. But because so much stuff on social media is now accessible, it's very, very difficult to decipher the good from the bad, the unhelpful from the helpful. So you go into this setting in a gym, and you see a lot of people that could do themselves damage. And you also see, on the flip side of that, is because now, we know that, sort of marketing and social is the whole sex sells, right? So you see that on social media in terms of, people selling products and they're wearing next to nothing. Well, obviously your 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds are seeing that and like, well, okay, well, I want to look like that. So then they go and do stuff in the gym. But, and even down to the clothing that some of these young guys and girls are wearing, it's very little. And that's what I mean. You go into a gym environment, and it's, I don't even call it a gym environment. I call it, it's more like a social setting and a hangout type space. And it's very trendy now to go to the gym. They're not necessarily training how I would call training, or how I did 20 years ago as a teenager. So I think there's real pros and cons to social media. I think, it's great for a business in terms of you can market yourself, you can sell yourself, and it's a free platform to gain influence, put your perspective across, and even monetize that. But the flip side of that, the barrier to do that, there's no accountability. I was saying to someone yesterday, all you've got to do is just, have abs, and you can call yourself an online coach, and you can put some qualifications up. And if you look the part, like we said, sex sells. So, yes, it's a bit of a minefield out there, man. And I think one of the things I'm grateful of, and I think, even though, Nick, you're a few years older than me, I think we're in this space now where we knew what life was like before social media. And we knew that, businesses grew without social media. Interactions, relationships were healthy and strong pre-social media. But we're also young enough now to know how to use this tool as well. So I think there's a generation, or there's a group of us who are in this sort of funny place where part of us, we want to go back to how it was before, but we also like the benefits of how it is now. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, my children, and probably yours as well, like my children wouldn't have never known life without a smartphone, and will never know life without a smartphone unless something drastic happens. And then my go on.
No, go on.
I was going to say, and then say, like, my parents are scared of this tool, or are very, very slow adapters to it, because they've never known life like that. Before they never grew up, like that. So it's interesting, man.
I mean, I think that the whole internet social media landscape is something that some of us are able to remember life without it. And like you were saying, our children, for example, haven't known life without it. It's what they've grown up with. And I think us learning how to adjust and navigate that requires some skill. I think it requires some wisdom. I think one of the things that helped me over the years, because I've had a real love-hate relationship with social media, so much so that even doing what I'm doing now in terms of having a YouTube channel and interviewing and speaking with people like you that I feel can add real value and insight and inspire others who are going to view, I really procrastinated. I'd really put it off for quite some time because of this love-hate relationship I have personally with social media and the whole web landscape. But there was a term you used just a second ago, which I think has been really helpful for me. And it's recognizing these things as tools. They're tools.
Yeah.
And they're tools that can be used for good.
Yeah.
You know, so like you were saying, it's about being able to use these tools to be able to reach others, to be able to add value to others, to be able to inspire, to be able to help people in life transformative ways by creating content that can be shared. And we all do that in our own way, don't we? You know, you're doing that as a strength and conditioning coach in the fitness industry. You're working with individuals on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately what you're doing, Dan, is life transformative work. You know, and what you're doing as well is it's beyond just what someone looks like physically. We know very well that our overall well-being isn't just about our physical health or our mental and emotional health or our spiritual health. We're a lot more, like you said earlier, we're far more complex than that. And actually having a holistic approach is really, really important, which is why I find it fascinating, you know, the whole fitness space, you know, and knowing you over the years and seeing the way you've kind of grown and developed as a strength and conditioning coach and just in the industry you're in, because it's about life transformation. And I know you've probably got tons of stories that you could share about people who have seen significant life change as a result of the work you've done in a gym space, you know, which is more than just physical.
Yeah, no, I think I agree, Nick, in terms of the social media as a tool, because I think even just I'll give you a very short story. Even just last week, there was a young guy who works for the gym, works for my gym, and we had a team meeting, and he was sort of just made a comment. I won't use what he said, but essentially he said he doesn't feel the gym's social media is up to par, should we say? He phrased it a little bit more colourful than that. So, and I said, okay. I said, tell me. And this, you know, he's a great guy. He's 21, 22. He said, just tell me a bit more. What do you mean by that? And he explained. I was like, okay. So I said, let me just explain a bit how I see our social media. And I said, I see it as a tool. I see it as a tool to grow our business. I said, I'm not massively interested in likes or comments or shares, although those things will definitely help. But I'm interested in, is what we're putting out reaching people so they feel that they're able to then reach back to myself and ultimately join the gym to then essentially pay money, and then we can obviously impact and help them. And I said, over the last 4 to 5 months, 90% of all the members that have come to us have come through social media. So could it be better? 100%. Will it be better? I hope so. But at the moment, it's serving its purpose. And I think, again, going back to just what we said earlier, I think because he's probably known life only with social media, and I think you know, there is an element of, you know, everyone likes it when someone likes your post or you get a little comment. But I think for that generation and definitely for younger, those things are very important. Whether that is affirming something or I don't know, man. You know what I mean? But I think that those things can be important, but actually for a business, they mean very little.
Well, I guess ultimately for the business, you're looking at return on investment. You know, you're looking at, you know, of X amount of content you're putting out, how much of that is resulting in X amount of clients coming through the door. And what you just said in terms of, you know, 90% plus coming as a result of social media, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Just on the social media and particularly around don't want to kind of focus on this particular young person that
Yeah.
you mentioned, but let's just say those that are several years younger than us that haven't known life without social media. One of the things that I pick up quite a lot when I'm having conversations is the impact of comparison.
Yeah, man.
You know, there is so much now on social media in terms of, like you said, someone just needs to show that they've got a six-pack and they can now be, you know, some fitness expert.
Yeah.
But people are comparing themselves to individuals who might have different goals to them, might have a whole world of resources available to them, might have a whole team behind them. There's a whole range of things that could be supporting what they're doing.
Yeah.
And yet there's all this comparison being made. What have you seen of that in your work, in terms of people coming to you and they're on social media and they're comparing themselves to others?
Yeah, Nick, I don't know where to start with that. I think because fitness is so visual, it is so, whether that's right or wrong, you know, we all care what we look like, right? We all care what we look like when we're standing in our briefs or our, you know what I mean? We all want to look good. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I generally don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I'll be honest with you, generally, you know, if you look good, and what I mean by look good, I mean that there is a healthy amount of body fat, that there is some tonage around the muscle. That's what I mean by looking good. Now, obviously, everyone's interpretation is different, so we won't go down that rabbit hole. But I think that is good for, like I said, your mental well-being, just your ability to function in life, and also your longevity in terms of health, especially as you get older, to do day-to-day stuff, from getting in and out of the car, getting out of the toilet, getting off from the floor if you fall, strengthening bones, that type of stuff. However, then you have, especially with social media, you have the extremes. And I think one of the things that's really, really unhelpful, and it's mainly from a male type of view, there are a number of big influencers. You know, for example, we look at someone like The Rock. Yeah. Now, he's a big guy. He's also got a lot of help from certain substances. Okay. Now that's never publicized, but how many 50-year-old men do you know that who have got bigger and leaner as they've got older? It's just physically not possible. It's not my opinion. It's just not physically possible. Now, I don't have a problem with anyone doing that, by the way. I don't have a problem with, you know, people going, I'm talking about sort of performance enhancing drugs and those type of stuff.
Yeah.
However, because that thing it's a bit of a taboo and it's never spoken about. And I use The Rock as an extreme example, but there are countless and countless of people who are influencers, or people trying to sell their products or whatever they're trying to sell on social media, who are not natural. Essentially, they're taking performance enhancing drugs to look a certain way. You know, there was a big thing that came out a few months ago around someone called the Liver King. I don't know if you've ever heard about this guy.
No, I haven't.
But yeah, he promotes ancestral living, like eating bulls' testicles and eating liver, cow's liver, all this type of stuff.
That's probably why I've not heard. That's probably why I've not heard of him.
But he lives out in the States, and he's a very wealthy man, but he's got this big beard, big hair, and he always walks around with his top off, and he's jacked. Yeah, he's in very, very good shape. But essentially, he's trying to sell these products, and if you eat this, he's not verbalizing it, but essentially what he's saying is, if you ate this, you will look like me.
Yeah.
Okay. He does interviews. He goes up to Times Square with his top off, and he's in good shape, right? Well, then a whole emails got leaked a few months ago, and it all came out to saying that he was taking around about £10,000 to £12,000 worth of steroids a month.
Wow.
And he got some advice from someone who deals with that. Prior to him coming out on social media, he grew his platform in 9 months from nothing to over 1 million in 9 months. Okay.
Wow.
And it all came out saying that he's on steroids. Now, when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, I knew that.
You weren't surprised. Yeah.
No, but so many people were like, I can't believe that. And that's an extreme example. But so I think that can be really, really unhelpful, especially for young guys. And I think it's the same for
For
females as
females.
well.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, all you have to look at, on social media is, pictures of women in very, very tight clothing. That certain camera angle is angled a certain way to enlarge certain parts of their body and stuff like that. Man, it's super, super unhelpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my daughter's nearly 12 and she's not on social media yet, but it's a matter of time. And already I see the difference even between my son and my daughter in terms of just the way they look.
Yeah.
And obviously that's heightened when you go to secondary school and stuff.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a bit more stuff like that. But yeah, man, it's challenging because I think comparison, and I sometimes battle with it as well. Don't get me wrong, man. I look at The Rock and think, and I have to remind myself, okay, Dan, yeah, but he's on drugs and you're not. There's a big, big difference, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it can be unhelpful. Then it filters down to some of our clients in terms of when they come in. I think, generally the people that the demographic that we're trying to market to are probably, late 30s, early 40s. So are probably in a similar space to me in as much as, yes, they have social media. Yes, they would, they would use it, but they remember life without it.
Yeah,
the reason we're trying to
their
market
lives aren't necessarily driven by it.
No, because obviously, we provide a higher end personal training, and when you're 20, you don't have a lot of disposable income. Whereas when you're late 30s, 40s, and 50s and above, you generally have a bit more. So that's who we try and target. So we probably not. I'm not seeing that so much in terms of what we deal with. But yeah, I can talk for hours on how I honestly feel like it's unhelpful social media when it comes to the fitness space. Taken away from the fact that you can promote, there's definitely more cons to pros in my opinion.
Yeah. And you said that within the fitness space, we could argue that it has a similar effect across various spaces, can't we? This idea that somebody's life is so much better than mine, gives people sometimes a sense of discontentment, a real lack of appreciation for what they do have, who they do have, what their life actually is affording them, because there is so much time being focused on what other people seemingly have.
Definitely.
Which can be really unhealthy. So,
and I think every time, just to finish last thing on social media, every time so I spent January off social media. It's a game changer, man. It's a game changer, and I recognise I probably need to be on there for business. But now I'm back in, and I'm now trying to find, and you can use balance in this context, trying to find the balance of, okay, can I just go on it for a very short periods of time? Because there's nothing new under the sun on social media or in anything really. But so if there's no messages and there's no comments, I don't need to do anything, because I outsource all my social media for the business side of things anyway. So I actually don't need to do anything. So sometimes I'll try and say, well, why are you on there, Dan? Get off. Now, look, don't get me wrong, man. Like, there's nothing wrong with being on social media in and of itself, but I know for me personally, it can spiral, and I can lose 20 minutes of my day just from looking at random stuff. And I've got better things to be doing.
Well, you've got important things to be doing as a business owner, and it's being able to catch yourself in those moments when you can start to see you're slipping down that slope of times just going away, and you go into a rabbit hole, and you ended up scrolling. I think they call it, is it doom scrolling? I think that's the term. But you just kind of end up just scrolling, and the next minute, 35 minutes have gone, and then you've got to rush to do the next thing on your list because you've now killed time. Thinking about your Instagram feed, which again I've been able to observe over a period of time, and I've seen that kind of grow, and I've seen you growing along your feed. In particular, Dan, you and competing.
Mm,
So I know that
yeah.
you've spent quite a lot of time in terms of preparing yourself for competition,
Mm,
and I would love I would love to hear, and I'm sure others would love to hear a little bit about your journey in terms of the place of competition in your life. What competition
mm.
means for you, what's kind of the motivation behind competing. Obviously you can say a little bit about the type of competition you've been involved with,
Okay. Yeah.
but that would be really helpful to hear, I think.
Mm. Um, yeah. I think um, I've always loved competing.
Mm,
Um, and people say, it's very common for people to say, I'm just trying to be the best version of myself. That's not for me. I'm trying to beat the person who's in front. That's always. It's never really been about me.
yeah.
It's been about for me trying to see how far, and I can talk about the different disciplines I'm
Mm,
competing at. How far can I get with something, knowing the constraints I have in terms of competing? And when I mean constraints, I mean family, business, children. Not that there are
yes.
constraints in and of themselves, but in the context of competing, it's a hindrance, and you know what I
Well,
mean by that.
yeah. I mean, I would. I know. I think you're being polite there. I would say they are constraints because
Yeah.
actually, somebody who doesn't have a commitment to a marriage of,
Mm,
14 years, or someone who
yeah.
doesn't have children who are of a young age that need
Mm,
attention and
yeah.
time, emotional and mental capacity, and someone who doesn't have
Yeah.
a business to run, they're not constrained by some of the pressures mentally,
No,
physically,
definitely
and
not.
just energy wise that come with those things. So,
Yeah, 100%.
I
Yeah.
think, and it's not to say that what you're not saying is that they are negative constraints,
No, not
but
at
they
all.
are
No,
constraints.
they're constraints. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I am a all or nothing type of person. I've always been like that, and there are pros and cons to that in many different ways.
Mm,
And I think growing up, that's all I wanted to was a professional athlete in some context,
mm,
because I feel the attributes that you need to do that, discipline, just being focused, I know I've got those things. I
mm.
think fundamentally I just wasn't gifted enough in any one particular discipline to do that. Um, and also, I got married at a fairly young age. I was, a few days after my 25th birthday. I think that's young. So,
Mm.
and I think that was, in many ways, I think that was it was a blessing that I did, because otherwise it would have been all about me. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've always competed. I've competed from a young age in athletics to I used to do some amateur boxing, which was fun, man. I wouldn't. It was. I look back on some of those nights, and I would love to be in the age we are now, where it would be on social media, because I don't have any footage of it or any pictures.
Mm.
And if you know South London, like I was going to the Woolwich Army Barracks to compete, and they were
Mm.
like, and I was over in Eltham, and there's some hostile places in as much as competing in terms. The atmosphere was just a very much a full of sort of working men's clubs, those types of places.
Mm.
Um, I can look back on it and think they were cool, but at the time I was very nervous and very
Mm.
scared going into those environments.
Mm.
But I look back, and I think I learned a lot of those. And it'd be great just to have some of that stuff on social, just captured. But I don't
Yeah.
anyway. It's in here, which is second best. So I think I've always loved to see how far I can push myself to achieve something, because I think generally, I always feel the body can do so much more than we think it can, and it's always this that gives out first. And
Yeah.
I will die on that hill, because
Yeah.
I've experienced it on so many different times. Whether
Mm.
it's boxing, I've competed a bit in CrossFit. Now I'm in the realm of sort of doing some powerlifting stuff, and I've known, when it comes to training competing, environment is everything.
Mm.
Um, you can't replicate something, you can't beat it, and the way I like it to, and where I feel pretty much every young guy will be able to understand this. When you're playing Saturday or Sunday league football, you always play better when the girls are watching. Don't tell me otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's something that comes up, um,
Mm.
or you flop. I think there's one or two ways, right? I think
Yes.
there are one or
Yes.
two ways, and I think some people don't. I've had training partners who when me and as an old training partner, we were pursuing a 200 kilo squat together. And we would always train together. And he used to find that every time we came to train together, when we were squatting, he would just crumble under the pressure, especially when there were people watching, because we verbalized what we were trying to do. Where I've always been the opposite. I've always been like, the time's now, Dan, just go, you can go for it. And I've liked that. And that, is it a bit self-indulgent? Maybe. But I find that in those moments, I'm able to access something where my body's tired or I don't feel like I can do it. There's something that goes, yeah, you can. And you just got to push and you got to go. You can do much more than we think we can. So I've always loved that element of competing. And I've always said, when I get to 40, I'll rein it back and I'll be one of those guys that just hits the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and just does a little, does a little bit and that. But I know what I'm like, and I I hope I don't get a serious injury. But I feel that would probably be the only thing that would take me out of it. I feel that I still got 20 odd years to compete, and I plan to do that. Just even now, kids are a bit older. There's probably a bit more capacity, maybe not right at this moment, but in the coming years to come, I feel like that's something that I enjoy it, man. There's just nothing more to say that I love it, and I always want to see what can I do.
So there's something about compete. Ultimately, yes, there is the level of pushing yourself, but there's also something about being up against somebody else also just helps you to kind of really push past those kind of really what you described as the mental barriers. And that's probably the last thing that needs to be overcome, that mindset, that voice in your head that's saying, give up, you're too tired.
And I think when it comes to training, I think there are so many parallels, and I know you can relate to this, Nick, that can cross over into life. Just because when you're training, it's just monotonous. You're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and that's life, right? Really, the mundane stuff is that. So if you can, when things get challenging and tough physically, if you'll then find yourself in other situations, circumstances where you're going, okay, well, I can do it there. So I know I can do it there. Yes, slightly different, but there are principles that can be carried across.
It's that mindset, isn't it? It's that mindset. Especially when, like you said, things are feeling difficult. You mentioned earlier around, being able to pivot and adapt. I know, for example, there's been times when I've been unwell and I've been unable to train as a result of that. When I got hit with COVID, I literally couldn't do anything. I mean, anybody who's experienced COVID would know that, just the same as anybody who's experienced any other type of really debilitating illness or sickness or injury for that matter. When I busted my ribs, the first time I couldn't train at all. Second time I tweaked my rib, I wasn't able to do training on the mats in terms of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for example. But I was still able to go to the gym and do some strength work and some cardio work. It was adapting. It was making some adaptations. 100%, and I think that is about mindset. Equally, and I know for me, there's times when I just want to stay in my bed. I don't really want to get up and go to the gym, but I also recognize that sometimes it's about needing to just, like you said, those monotonous things. If it's in the schedule, get up and do it. It's what you've agreed to do. So
definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
I mean, I guess where do you see that translating into other areas of life then, for example, i.e. parenting, being a husband, and business?
Do you mean in terms of
that competitiveness, that discipline, that focus that actually says, no, keep going?
I think, I think one of the things I've learned, and I'm still learning when it comes to marriage, is there are a lot of things that I will do when it's just around the house I don't really want to do, whether it be the dishes or putting the washing on or cleaning up or making my wife's breakfast or whatever it is. And it's not that like I'm dead set against. I definitely don't want to do it. I want to do it anyway through gritted teeth. But it's more of a case of life would be easier if I didn't have to do those things. But then there's an element, what if I don't do it? That means that someone else has probably got to do it. And having my wife is sort of, her health has been a bit challenging for the last 7 or 8 years. So in terms of her capacity to do certain things, isn't probably what mine is. I've always felt I've probably got a fairly larger capacity. It doesn't feel as large as it used to be. But I think, well, then if I've got that, it means I can serve and I can help and do the extra school runs where I can, or, come back from work on her day off just to pick the kids up. I can do that. And again, as long as it's, I think I'm not always great of adapting on the spot. My wife is definitely a lot better at doing that. As you can probably tell, I'm fairly disciplined, structured. This is how the day is. So then when something something happens, I think I'm definitely a lot better, but I'm still something I'm trying to learn how to adapt and pivot on the spot.
Yeah.
So I think there's some of the things that I think that have definitely helped in terms of some of my training stuff, in terms of sort of, just with the kids. Even last night, like I know, my son just ordered one of them. My son's really getting into football at the moment. He ordered one of them nets rebound nets.
Yes.
And my wife and my daughter out last night, and we got back about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and it turned up. And obviously it was dark, so we couldn't play, but I knew he wanted to put it up. And obviously I wasn't feeling great. And he knew I didn't really want to do it. And he said, "No, it's cool, Dad, don't worry, I'll do it tomorrow." I said, No, it's fine, I'll do it. And so we put it together. And even in those moments, I was thinking, I really don't want to be doing this. But I was like, I know it's sometimes it's those small things. Like, and don't get me wrong, man, I probably would say I mess up daily when it comes to kids and all those type of things. But I knew that was a small thing that was important to him to do it. And it didn't really do anything for me other than, we were just chilling together. But I know that benefited him, and that was a good thing to do for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just doing the mundane, something I didn't really want to do. But I think when you are used to doing that, it can be a little bit easier to do it with the things that you really don't feel passionate about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. And I think that's a really good place to kind of almost wrap up, I think, this idea that there are times when we may not necessarily feel up for doing something. There are times when things are challenging. There are times when things are difficult for whatever reason. But with a sense of discipline, and with a sense of understanding what's important, i.e., in this particular case, your relationship with your son, what you're modeling to him in that moment, it trumps it all. It trumps it. And what you've learned over the years as somebody who's in your particular industry, in your space, and just your history, traveling an hour at 14 to go to the gym each day. I mean, that says a lot. that actually says a lot. What's also interesting is that that's something that's been built over years and years and years. And you are seeing the rewards for that now. In the sense that, you're managing a family. That's not to say that managing family is easy. Doesn't come with it without its challenges. You've just mentioned, your wife you've had to help with in terms of some health issues and stuff. But actually that discipline and consistency will no doubt have played a key role in helping you to kind of navigate each day, which is great.
Yeah. And I think just to sort of finish, I think one of the, I don't necessarily think it's a quote. I don't know if I heard it or I made it. I don't know, but I think anything that is worth having takes time to build.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that is from a physique to a marriage to a business to a friendship, anything, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we only ever did what we felt like doing, I know I probably wouldn't do very much.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
And we're all in that boat, isn't it?
yeah,
We're all
yeah,
in that boat, which is why it's so important to
yeah,
learn these things and try and apply them as
yeah.
best we can. Listen,
Mm,
Dan, it's been great speaking with you, and I'm sure everybody who's been watching and listening will have really been able to gain some insight and just some inspiration from what you've shared. I want
mm,
to thank you for your time again, especially because I know you've not been 100% well. Again,
mm,
just shows your commitment and your discipline. It was
mm.
in, and
Yeah, we keep in a diary,
you've
innit?
done it.
Yeah, man.
You've done it. You've done it,
Yeah,
which has
man.
been really, really appreciated. People might want to know where they can find you and see what you're doing.
Okay,
Where
yeah.
would
So
they
if you
do that?
can, my own social media page is a little bit quiet at the moment. I'm sure I will jump back on it, but that is Coach Dan Fram.
Okay.
And the business is the Fitco underscore. The Fitco underscore. So yeah, you can find our stuff
Brilliant.
on there. I mean, to be fair, on my page, like I say, there's not a huge amount at the moment, but you can scroll back a few years. There's some good stuff on it, I think.
Mm.
Anyway, some helpful stuff that might be able
Yeah.
to help you.
Well, I would say I'll put the link to all of your platforms in the description so people can find it. And I would say to anybody, you know, I've followed what you've been doing on social media for some years now, and I would say there's definitely some valuable content on there that anybody interested in your particular space, interested in just in terms of improving their own well-being, physically, overall, mentally, emotionally, because it all ties in. They'll find stuff on there that will be helpful for them. So I'll definitely put that on there for people to find.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, bro. Thanks, man.
Dan, I'm going to let you go because I know you've got things to do for the afternoon. Rest well, and I hope you get well quickly. All right. Thanks again for
Thanks,
your
Nick.
time.
Cheers, bro. Appreciate you, man. Take care, man. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you, mate.